At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Welcome. I've been talking a lot about the importance of knowing who your ideal customer is and being able to identify who they are, what they look like, how they buy your products, and how they celebrate it when they get home. This is not an easy subject for most brands, and the challenge is that a lot of the databases out there don't accurately depict or identify who your core customer is. Today I'm talking to someone who's got a solution for that, and the best part about it is it can help you see other things that other databases overlook or ignore. It can help you isolate what's going on in a specific market, and the price is extremely reasonable. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned. So why does this matter? Having a canned top-line report and walking into retailer does nothing to differentiate your brand from other brands on the shelf. But being able to isolate what's unique about your product and being able to help to educate the retailer, not only about your product, but the customer that buys it, that's the win-win. This is how you grow sustainable sales. This is how you future-proof your brand. The best part about it is that you can bake those insights into your selling story. It's going to help your products resonate more with consumers and with retailers. And to go one step further, when you're trying to identify the best way to promote your brand, generic promotions don't do any good. They don't help you raise the bar or sell more. The majority of promotions are wasted, over 70%. Can you believe it? If you want your brand to be around a long time, the most effective way to do that is to more effectively manage your promotions. And this begins with understanding exactly who your ideal customer is, and then develop creative strategies to promote to them. As an industry, we need to get away from the one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter strategies that every brand uses, even the big brands. At the end of every episode, I always include one easy-to-download, quick-to-digest strategy that you can instantly adopt and make your own. Well, today I'm going to share that with you at the beginning. Today I want to let you know that I recently launched a trade promotion ROI calculator. You heard me correctly. And the best part is that the tool is free, and you can use it to calculate the effectiveness of your promotions. You're going to learn more about it by going to my website and clicking on the Promotion Analysis Tool button across the top menu. And not to worry, there are instructions on how to use it on the website, so I'm not going to repeat them here. Go to brandsecretsandstrategies.com. Also, don't forget to check out the weekly webinar series I launched to help brands impacted by COVID. If you like the podcast, do me a huge favor and share it with a friend. Help me raise the bar in our industry. Remember, the goal here is to get your product onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Now here's Mike. Mike, thanks for coming on today. Can you please start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you're at today? And I'm also interested in how you came about these strategies. We'll get to that in a minute. But so how did you get to where you're at today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation from our conversation last week. I'm the CEO and founder of DecodeM, which is a research and analytics company that decodes data into momentum. My journey is kind of a non-traditional journey. I grew up interested in politics. I was actually a political pollster working for candidates like Bill and Hillary Clinton and Mike Bloomberg, doing polling, asking questions, getting answers, analyzing results, and giving political strategy. Over time, I realized that so much more data was available that why limit ourselves to polling data? And I became interested in customer CRM data, behavioral data, social media analytics, and I wanted to expand into decoding all sorts of data.
So when you say that you're into all kinds of data, what does that mean exactly? And why does this matter to this conversation? And does that make sense?
Yeah. Over time, and I know you've been doing this for a while as well, we've been getting so much more types of purchasing data, behavioral data, social media analytics. Over time, they talk about big data, which is such an overused phrase, but really we now can understand what people are doing and how they're behaving without asking them. And so now that we have that purchasing and behavioral data right at our fingertips, if we have the conversation data, we can analyze it without ever speaking to them and then predict what their actions are going to be in the future.
So, how do you leverage that technology with what you do? And then, who would your ideal consumer customer be for the kind of information that you provide?
Yeah. Well, what's amazing to us is not only is there more data available, but we now have tools to analyze the data so that we can predict. I used to predict political behavior. I knew if you were going to vote for candidate A or candidate B based on polling data. I now can predict what products you're going to buy, where you're going to go on vacation, what your level of interest. But even more importantly than that, I can predict the future now by predicting momentum. I went back to the Newtonian definition of momentum, mass times velocity, and created a momentum metric called M factor that actually measures cultural relevancy. And I can use that with data that's available. So I know what's going to have momentum before it has the momentum.
Interesting, and it's a big claim, and I'm going to challenge the heck out of you on this.
Let's go at it. I went big.
No. Okay, let's go good. I mean, it's a bold statement, and I appreciate this. So, with that in mind, what kind of data are you looking at first? Let's just break it down.
So momentum, using that definition, is mass times velocity. So for mass, I'm looking for mostly volume metrics to understand what's the sheer level of conversation, who's talking about it, how frequently are they talking about it, and how is that conversation going off? Like, what are all the components to understand the mass of it? The velocity is actually where all the innovation is. So velocity, we're using artificial intelligence, sentiment analysis, proprietary algorithms to understand what are the dimensions of the conversation, how engaged is it, and how polarized is that conversation. And let me take it a step further. I believe that there are, and I can prove this statistically, there are 5 sort of momentum drivers. There's disruption, innovation, polarization, stickiness, and social impact. And so I can use artificial intelligence to pull apart a conversation, understand those dynamics, and be able to understand what is the conversation. So the more polarized it is, the more velocity, the more it's having to talk about innovation or creating stickiness, the more engaged the discussion is, the more momentum that the product, the topic, the issue is going to have.
Could you give me number 5 again, please?
Social impact.
Okay.
And you know what? In today's world that we're living today, social impact was number 5. It might go on to number 1. And so if we were having this conversation in January, you and I would be talking about polarization. The country is polarized. We're on different ends. We're struggling, and that would have been what was dominating the conversation. We were politically polarized. We were polarized in products. We had this push and pull, and now with what's going on with COVID-19, social impact has zoomed to the top of the list, and is probably one of the most important drivers.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you really good on this. So when you start talking about, so where do you get the data? How do you, first of all, come by? What kind of data are you looking at? And then why is this relevant?
The data sources are diverse. So we're looking at all blogs, all media, which can be printed media. It can be media that comes off of all radio. Anything that gets put onto the internet is basically fair game. So there's thousands of data sources. The only data sources that it doesn't use would be closed platforms like Facebook and Instagram, but Twitter is open and boy, there's a big Twitter discussion today. But Twitter's open, Reddit's open, and all those other, every media outlet has blogs and comments. All of that is brought in. So
Okay.
the volume of conversation is as good as it can be. Over time, I think it's going to get better. This idea of closed platforms is going to go away. And you saw the government today came out with they're going to put some regulations on social media. But I think we're going to get to open platforms. But everything is knowable. You just need to know where to look.
Okay, so now I'm going to challenge you as far as what's knowable. What about all the people that aren't on a platform or do not have internet access or do not use these technologies?
Okay, so you're now talking about people that are completely off the grid, that they're having face-to-face interactions. They're having a conversation like we're having now, which it might not get transcribed. So if it doesn't get transcribed, I won't know it. But as you know, fewer and fewer of those fewer of those people exist that are completely off. The vast majority of people are doing some sort of online either interactions or they're doing some online reading because so much consumption is done on our smartphone, like one of the biggest innovations that's going on, or they're consuming their news, they're keeping in touch with their families. So that as more and more interactions happen that way, more and more data is available.
Well, what I'm getting at, Mike, and this is why I'm asking these questions. I mean, the data is only as good as the inputs, first of all.
100%.
So when you are looking at these data inputs, meaning how you're capturing the data, I know a lot of people that don't use their smartphones the way that you do, the way the millennial does. And so when you're talking about the way that people consume and use data, for example, I gave a talk on this years ago, and I held up my smartphone and I said, my son doesn't know that you can talk on this thing. And the point is that he does all of his texting and he doesn't have conversations. Now,
Right.
they use it a lot differently than I use it, than a lot different than other people. So when you're trying to commoditize everyone in the space, and you're trying to use that same metric to say that we're all the same, so to speak, doesn't that flatten the data? Doesn't that create a lot of hidden errors in the data?
Well, we're not just using data of people having conversations. It's also news sources that are reporting issues that are happening. It's blogs that people might be reading, so they don't have to interact with it. They might just be consuming it. Like I think of it as there's been a natural progression of the way that from newspapers and radios to TV to internet, there's been a progression of how information travels. And so with our M factor, we're consuming all media, whether it's a conversation or it's actually coming from other governmental sources, media outlets, and what have you. So are there limitations? Yes, but is the vast majority sort of moving in the direction that we're talking? Absolutely.
So then how do you screen out the noise, the bots, the conspiracy theories, the fake news, the whatever you want to call it? And the point being is this.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the data, the natural tendency is to, as you were saying earlier, disruption. Where is the largest share of voice? And if the largest share of voice is telling you that the sky is gray or not gray, say I don't know, turquoise, okay, or orange or whatever, and it's not. Your eyes see something entirely different. So how do you structure out that share of voice that is so much larger than what my eyes are physically seeing?
Well, I think you have really hit on the number one concern and issue that we all have is how much of this volume is real and how much of this is manipulation or created. That's why mass is not our only metric. That's why the velocity is actually so important. So velocity are two sentiment algorithms that we actually run to look at. One looks at long form, one looks at short form, so that we can actually filter out same conversations. You'll recall, I mean, look, we all know what happened in the 2016 election with the Russian interference, whether you believe that or not. But we know that something was definitely happening. But we saw with Mike Bloomberg, who had bots that were populating Twitter accounts, all saying the same thing. So our algorithms actually screen out as much as we can content that looks similar, content that looks like it's manufactured, content that doesn't look authentic, but it's not perfect, and we always have to be on high alert to manipulation.
So with that said, and thank you for getting into that, sharing that, when you're talking about understanding what people are thinking about, how can you prescribe or how can you make recommendations based upon that noise? I mean, the reality is that there's no way to perfectly do it. So let me give you an analysis. In my world, we have what they call the LOHAS shopper. Okay, the LOHAS customer is lifestyle of health and sustainability. And so in the mainstream world, most people tend to commoditize that consumer. Someone eats a couple salads and goes for a couple Someone who eats a couple salads and goes for a walk, okay? In my world, a low-cost consumer is someone who's also interested in their carbon footprint. They're not very vocal online. They're not going to be the person that's going to get the most disruptive voice in terms of the volume or the mass. And yet, those are the trends that are driving everything in CPG. Right. And so when you're trying to understand what's going on or skate to where the puck's going, if you don't have your eyes on that consumer, then you're overlooking things. And so let me frame it this way. Big brands believe that if they promote their products, then they can sell it. In other words, if I discount it enough, I'm going to sell my product. So with that, you've got mass, you've got velocity, right? The reality is that they're struggling on shelf. It's the small disruptive super premium products that don't fit into that criteria that are the ones that are driving sustainable sales across every category and every channel. But yet what I hear you saying is that you would filter those out. How would you
I don't know if we'd filter them out. So what you're describing is a high velocity product that consumers are buzzing about. It's new on the block. It's actually created disruption and might actually we might actually see a trend where that M factor is spiking. And we see that from time to time where the big, as you said, the big CPG has this massive mass and it takes so much velocity just to move it a little bit. And then a new, smaller, more nimble player comes on, amazing idea, captures people's attention, and their velocity goes through the roof. And their challenge is how do they take that velocity and keep transforming so that they're just not one-dimensional and can sustain going forward. Because as you know, consumers move on. You've got to have a next. Like I have a friend, well, I think you might know her, Gail Becker, who created cauliflower pizza.
Sure.
Right. And so it was a cauliflower-based pizza dough that frozen pizzas that went into the market. She had tremendous velocity. Cauliflower pizzas became the rage. But if she just stayed there, bigger competitors would come in, commoditize the category. So she had to go to chicken nuggets. She had to go to tater tots, whatever. She has to keep transforming that cauliflower innovation to keep moving ahead, or she will just be a fad and go away.
Good example. I've tried to get her on the podcast. If you know her, I'd love an introduction.
Oh my God! You know she's such a big deal now. That's $100 million company now.
Well, and it's exciting, and I think that it's fascinating what they're doing, and I love the brand, etc. But the point is, and the good example, I was going to use gluten free, but okay, let's use this. The
Okay.
problem is that the databases are not coded correctly. So the databases don't isolate that unique customer that buys that product. So we'll use this as an example, perfect example. And so when she's making decisions based upon the relevant data, she has really no line of sight to what's really going on at shelf. This is what I mean.
Right.
The
Right.
consumer that adopted those trends earlier, early adopters that were the ones that fueled that innovation, the ones that fueled those sales, those customers are being ignored or overlooked because of the way the databases are set up. So
Yeah.
one of my areas of expertise is rich product attribution. And if you don't have that mindset of the way to look at the data, and by the way, all databases do this, they commoditize the shopper. In other words, you're either a pizza or you're not a pizza, right? Plant-based
Right.
or not plant-based. And by the way that they define plant-based isn't necessarily correct either, depending on what database, etc. But my point is, how do you help a brand like hers identify what the trends are so she can skate to where the puck's going? So you made the comment that she came up with a tater top. Okay, that's really cool. So how does she know when to pivot, when to innovate, where to innovate, etc., if the data doesn't support any of that type of innovation?
Well, the initial work that we did was to understand that there was an underserved market with celiac and all these different
Right.
issues, and there was no product that existed. So one, we identified some white space. Then we had to get a pitch deck because just because there's white space doesn't mean anybody will actually stock it.
Right.
And so she had to have a product that tasted good. They would go. Then we had to look at if what other areas are not what other products exist that don't meet this market need, and we look for momentum. And so there's an art and a science to what she's doing of what are the natural brand extensions. What does that consumer buy if they didn't have celiac or didn't require gluten free or what have you? And then where does that innovation go? And you're so right that the behavioral data or the consumer data might not get you there. You have to look for the lateral learnings and then take it forward. And especially in her category where she's continuously innovating and there's a bunch of fast followers, she has to stay one step ahead of where's that market gap. It's art as much as data. I wish it were all data, but it's not. It's also some creativity.
Well, and thank you for sharing that. And again, really good example. And I hope she gets a chance to listen to this because this is why this matters. This is what I'm trying to teach brands. This is the space that I play in, Mike, is trying to teach brands how to leverage those insights. And so if you're a brand and you're in Denver, Colorado, and you want to know how your natural brand is competing against other brands in the category, there's no database on the planet that's going to answer that question.
No.
If you are a brand at Whole Foods or at a big retailer or whatever, then you are somewhat blind to other trends because of the way the databases are set up. And so I liken this to being paying attention to the ripple in the pond. And so what I do is I help these
Smart.
brands identify where the ripple is forming and help them understand where the ripple is going before it becomes a tidal wave and ends up on a Kroger shelf and a tsunami and ends up on a Walmart shelf.
Right.
And this is why this matters, and this is why I was thrilled to talk to you. So going back a little bit and talking about Gail's product, which, again, a huge fan, love the product, would love to talk to her. But the idea behind that is, how do I help these brands grow and thrive when the databases commoditize, meaning they lump everyone together? So how do I help these brands understand the value going beyond a canned top line report? What I'm getting at is that, unfortunately, in this industry, the mindset is that if you're a retail buyer, if I lay a report down on your desk and say, look, I printed this off myself, aren't you impressed? It's a waste of ink and paper. In other words, the same strategy that someone would use to sell motor oil is not going to help me sell organic baby food. More
No.
importantly, those databases don't understand or don't They don't look at the way the consumer actually buys the product. And so when you're talking about cauliflower, for example, you've mentioned gluten-free, you've mentioned allergy-free, etc. There's a lot more to it than that. It's keto friendly. It has a lot of other, allergy free. You mentioned that one. A lot of other attributes within it that she should be going after, which I don't think she does at the way I look at the product. And my point is, if she could capitalize on those specific attributes, she could do even more. She could even identify better how the consumer shops, and then go to one step further. If you think about the way retail is today, retail's kind of broken in my opinion. So retail today is, how do I squeeze as much margin out of a single item? That's it. End of discussion.
Right.
She should be thinking about, okay, my consumer buys this product, and when they buy this product, what are the other products they buy, etc.
Right.
How do I help the retailer squeeze margin out of all of the products in their market basket? And again, that's part of this, why I wanted to have this conversation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think this is where my other business, polling, what comes in is absolutely what else is in their market basket? What else are they thinking about? And how can we dimensionalize that? It's as much of a market segmentation and understanding a type of buyer as it is understanding the products. And your analysis of, there's so much product-based segmentation, and yet if you overlaid an attitudinal or a needs-based segmentation, you would find really where all the other opportunities lie for brand extensions to further sell out and to target other consumers. I'll give you another example. I have another client called FOMO. They make allergy-free cookies. Wonderful company that's just taking off, and they need that ignition point they've got an amazing tasting product, all natural, allergy-free, all the things that would be right for a consumer who can't eat good cookies right now, can't really get into a store. How do they reach out to their market? It's a problem that they're struggling with, and it's not a brand problem. It's a distribution problem.
Well, okay, on that note, I'm glad you brought that up. Again, I think retail's broken. This is why. Retailers spend most of their time trying to sell us the products on their shelves rather than asking us what we want to buy. Right. And so what I mean by that is, when a brand goes to a retailer and says, hey, I'm a great guy, great slogan, got a cool product, right, here's some money, please put me on the shelf. Like, that's kind of the way it works. Instead of focusing on that, if a retailer wants to remain relevant, meaning how do you help that retailer compete against their market, against their competition? Let me frame it this way. Retailers want three things, Mike. They want more customers in their store, they want a reasonable profit in the category, and they want a competitive advantage. And if I, as a brand, can help a retailer capture those things or achieve those three goals, then a savvy retailer is going to bend over backwards and help me out. So the reason this matters, and this is what I do, and this is why I take the kind of data that you provide, for example, and bake this into the selling story and help add rocket fuel to what you provide. So in an example like FOMO, and I'm sorry I haven't tried the product yet.
You love. We gotta have them send you some cookies. They're amazing.
Oh, I would be game for that. Lots of them. So with that said, what I would do is I would help them craft the story around how the consumer shops, when they shop, how they shop, why they shop, etc. Right. And so going back to the cauliflower example again, or let's put it this way. I did a feature article for the 2016 Category Management Handbook. It was supposed to be focused on plant-based, but instead it was on organic because of the way the database is coded, a whole different question. So we're looking at all outlet, about $1 trillion in sales. And when you look at dairy, when you isolate dairy's up 1.5%. Organic dairy is up 12.4%.
Yeah.
Organic dairy represents 9.8% of that pie. If you remove that small chunk of the pie that is organic, total dairy would be flat or declining, and that is true for every single category. My point is this. It's those attributes, that ripple in the pond, that small ripple, that is responsible for all the sales. And so helping a brand like FOMO or like cauliflower, help them understand that, or how to bake that into their selling story, and then take that to retail and help educate the retailers on why this matters. That's the space I play in. So the reason I was excited about you guys reaching out to me is that I'm always looking for quality data sources that I can use to help brands like this grow and thrive. And so the traditional way to go to market is sit down, shut up, get out your checkbook. That's not a sustainable business model.
Yeah.
And so if I can help these brands identify what are the promotions that make the most sense for them, how can I get the most lift, the most increase in sales over time? How can I help the retailer understand the market basket, the consumer that buys my product, etc.? More importantly, how can I help that retailer understand why my product is going to drive more sustainable sales, more traffic, more profit in their stores than another product? And that means that I need to get beyond the fact that if you're a pizza, period. That's it. In a sense, okay? The databases don't accurately code cauliflower. In fact, I would be surprised it even exists. And I would be willing to just about guarantee that it's not clean. So the data that you provide is incredible in the sense that it helps enhance that story.
Right.
So when we're having this conversation, what are your thoughts? How would you recommend a brand leverage what we are talking about to take their business to the next level and beyond?
Well, the M factor, that metric that measures cultural relevancy, really is that missing piece of data. Because how do you measure the zeitgeist, and yet where all the momentum is, that ripple that you're seeing, it's because you've learned how to read the zeitgeist. You say where the puck is going. I love your Wayne Gretzky analogy. But it really is. It's momentum tells you what has momentum means it's going up. You need to catch momentum. Our momentum factor goes 0 to 100. If you catch momentum at 10, you're going to be in very good shape because you're at the beginning of momentum. People are just buzzing about it, and it's going to go after it. If you catch it at 60, that's Kroger. That's right. When it's momentum, that means it's in Kroger, it's in Walmart, it's already gone mass. You need to catch it low. So we worked early on with CBD and getting that in when it had low momentum, but people were first starting to buzz about it. It was just, drunk elephant. It was just in a few places, and then it went everywhere. One of the big trends you'll laugh about is the drink of the summer is going to be frozen margaritas, and people are just. A month ago, we wrote a column that people were just starting to share recipes, how they were going to make frozen margaritas at home, because frozen margaritas used to always be a drink you got out, but whoever made them at home, they were a restaurant drink, and they came in all those varieties. But they were starting to share recipes. And so M factor has to be used to find those ripples and take them forward and use them as compelling data to read what's going on in culture. And that's where the ripples start.
I love your analogy. Makes a lot of sense. And I see the value for a bigger brand. But again, I'm going to come back to where we started. If I am that consumer that gets it, that understands that unique value proposition of a brand like cauliflower, FOMO, etc., you don't even see me on the radar until I become a bigger splash in the pond. How do you adjust? How do you get around that? Because that's my secret sauce.
Yeah, I know it's great. We don't see. We work with people like you. We don't see the brand. We see the need. We see people talking about it, searching for it, are interested in it, chatting with their friends about how to get it, or sharing a secret that they've learned. And then you're coming to sort of either develop the product or have the product that's starting to create that buzz and drive that momentum.
I would love to know more about how you do that specifically, because here's my challenge is that the way that solution providers, and I'd call you a solution provider, come up with data sets is that, like I said, it commoditizes things. So if you're not identifying that unique consumer that reads the label that intently, that knows the difference between, okay, example, I talked to a registered dietitian on the last podcast, and project I did for Pacific Foods, okay? So you have sodium, low sodium, no sodium, sodium added, etc. But chicken has sodium in it. So is that bad sodium or good sodium? Okay, well, what if I put Himalayan pink salt in it versus iodized salt? What if lower sodium means I have lower sodium than I had yesterday? So my point is, all these confusing things that we throw at the consumer that they don't understand.
Right.
It's being able to weed through that and understand the difference. Another example, Megafood was another client. So a whole food supplement, so a 50 milligram vitamin C tablet that is more potent than 1,000 milligram vitamin C tablet you buy, two for $1, whatever, two for $5, whatever. The difference being is that most of this just comes out of you and pees out of you, whereas the other product metabolizes in your body. So that's what I mean by more potent.
So much better, yeah.
So the customer that gets this, the customer that understands that cauliflower is a great, and by the way, we used to do this years ago, use it as a mashed potato substitute or as a lot
rice
of different
substitute.
things. Exactly.
Rice substitute.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great uses for it back before that was cool that you can use. So understanding or identifying that unique consumer. My sister has celiacs. So does my niece. We eat primarily gluten-free just because we do that. I mean, it's not because we have to be, but yet we do feel better. And so when you get away from the processed foods, identifying that or isolating that unique consumer and being able to focus on them. And so what I'm getting at is if you look at all the different databases that are out there, and I don't want to name any names because I don't want to embarrass anyone, etc., but they tend to throw people into buckets. Right. And those buckets are not me. In other words, I am not a clone of another natural shopper. So how do you identify with your database what I want and what's unique to me based upon my needs when I am barely even a droplet in the pond?
Because I'll understand for your issues on low sodium. I'll understand people who are looking for low sodium alternatives, people who have hypertension, people who have a medical condition, a health reason, what have you. And I'll see a conversation or I'll see an issue starting to gain momentum and people looking for solutions, even with FOMO, cookies that are safe to eat or pizza that can do celiac. They were both trying to solve a problem, and there was momentum coming around a solution. It wasn't coming around for the brand, and I think that's your brilliant point. It was coming around for there's something that's needed. Can we solve the problem, or alternatively, we have a solution? Can we generate interest in it? Both of those come through my database, and I can find those. I can find the trend. I'm going to take you out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Okay.
Because you're talking about you talk a lot about people food. One of the biggest categories that we're working with is pet food, and all the trends around pet health and wellness. The same trends that are happening in human food and human health and wellness and all the habits are all now starting to happen in pet. And you know, and I know that it's actually the same companies. They have a pet division and they have a human. Mars has, they have both divisions. Right. And so we can see people starting to seek solutions, and then the brands will start to develop. And Fresh Pet and some of these other companies have been first to get there and lead the consumer. And our M Factor can show the momentum for, we want healthy alternatives. We want wellness programs for our pets. And it works the same way as that momentum started to develop, and then the products followed, or the products created the relevancy, and then the consumers followed. There's two ways to do it.
Great analogy. Thank you for sharing that. So let me dig in a little bit deeper. Big brands innovate. Their idea of quote unquote innovation is changing a label or changing a flavor or changing a color on the package. It's not true innovation. These
Right.
natural brands are the true innovation of CPG.
Yes.
So, as an example, I was working for a big brand that had a drink and they put a label on it. It was a breakfast drink. They put a different label on it. It was a weight loss, whatever. I put another. So it was five different items, and
Right.
customers are aware of this. So it's these unique, smaller customers like cauliflower and FOMO, et cetera, that are driving these innovations, these changes. So, okay, with that said, then how do you help these brands identify that unique consumer that they need to be focused on?
it's it's by understanding what are the issues that matter to them, what are they seeking out, and what has cultural relevancy. The brands all morph to tap into cultural relevancy. Our idea of measuring cultural relevancy was to find out when things have momentum and are moving up, and don't follow them just as they're peaking and going down. You have to, as things are ascending, you have to transform before it reaches the top and go to the next thing. So your five changes to the drink sound genius because you wrote it up and then you morph to something else. You wrote it up and then you morph to something else. Those transformations are the essential components of momentum.
Well, but okay, that was the same product, just with a different label.
But that's catching momentum for what those labels signaled what had cultural relevance at the time.
Well, okay, so fair enough. But now getting back to the example before with cauliflower, for example, the thing that I think makes you these natural products, the space that I play in, so unique, is that they're at the level where they're listening to their consumer. In other words, big brands are spending all their effort and energy talking at us. We're great. We're number one. You need to buy us. We're popular. You got to buy us because we're great. On and on and
Yeah.
on. Okay, this constant drone of this is why you need us.
Yeah.
Whereas the little brands, they're having those intimate conversations with customers that would buy our product. In other words, I'm going to make a pizza. It's going to be gluten free. It's going to taste good, etc. Would you buy it? Okay, if it's allergy free, would you buy it? If it, these flavors, would you buy it? The point is it's reversing the traditional strategy from the drink example I just gave you.
Right.
And so when you're looking at the ripple in the pond that does not yet exist, that is not showing up in any database, it's not part of the conversation yet. How do you help a brand isolate or identify that and then bake that into their selling story? Because that's what I do.
Yeah, we identify the need. So we won't identify the product, but we'll see the M factor will measure unmet needs, things that are being discussed and shared, and then we'll get it before there's a product that meets the need. We can see the discussion beginning. And like I gave you the example last time we talked about with chickpeas. Another one where there was a desire, there was a need for a healthier snack. They wanted to be natural. Chickpeas were with an S, where it was a hot product, but there was nothing that really tapped into it. And so Chickpeas, the brand, early days, not today, they're massive, but the brand really fit in a healthy alternative, based natural, tasted good. But it was way in the beginning, because who would have ever thought that you could have a chickpeas or a potato chip? Like, we've heard a lot of potato chips. We didn't know that chickpeas could be so crunchy.
Yeah.
And so we would have saw that desire for a healthy alternative for snacking. We would have heard conversation. I'm looking for something. And then you're right, that brand has to have that intimate engagement. It's led by early adopters who may be natural, organic, health conscious. That when you described who takes a hike, the Lohas, like all of those things start to fit, and they're not in a database because the category doesn't exist.
Right.
There is no category for chickpeas, healthy chickpeas snacks, and yet now it's in every kid's lunch because parents feel better than giving them Frito-Lay potato, Frito-Lay potato chips.
So, okay, so that's really cool that you can do that. If I'm a brand and I come to you and I want to understand this, how do you engage me? How do you help me? How do you work with me?
I think this is the part you'll love. We we want to make this accessible. So you have an issue, you're something you're thinking about. Give me the M factor on these 5 issues because I want to understand how to position. I want to understand the unmet needs. We will run M factor scores on. We can do it on anything you can Google. So a topic, uh, an issue, a brand, a celebrity, a product, and we can give you the M factors to find out what the what the momentum is for that, what's the mass, what's the velocity, so that you can identify uh, which way to position, where's the optimal market to go into, which one is sort of peaking, so it has the biggest opportunity, and then we bundle these in small packages. One of the things that I didn't say is that data should also be accessible, and I'm not going to use the word cheap, but it shouldn't have to be the biggest expense. And data was always it was always sort of monopolized by those who could afford it. And so many smaller companies like you're describing could never have opportunities to get at the same data that the big players. So our M factors, a package of 10 M factors will be $2,500 because
Wow.
because you're a small company. We want to do more research. We want to do consumer research. We want to work with your brand positioning. There's other opportunities, but getting baseline research shouldn't be your biggest expense in your budget. Your biggest expense should be your R&D and bringing your product to market. The data should help you make the right decisions along the way.
That's music to my ears. Thanks, Mike. I mean, I really appreciate that because this is what I do. This is what gets me excited. And the challenge is, going back to the example of Denver, Colorado, I can't find those insights. There's no way for me to know what's going on in the market, but yet I bet I could probably use your product to be able to do that. And what I'm getting
Absolutely.
at, yeah, so let me frame why this matters. Many years ago, I helped get a let's just say I helped get exclusive distribution for the company I worked for the diapers, Huggies. And the way that I did that was by helping the retailer understand who that unique consumer was that bought those products and what the other products that they were that they bought. The point being is that the databases, first of all, they didn't share the data with any of the syndicated data providers, so I could not use that.
Right.
Secondly, because of the way the data is coded, the way that people look at it, there were issues there. But by my being able to find a creative strategy to identify who their shoppers are, how their shoppers shop, etc., then I was able to develop a story around that. So the point being is what I do is I help these brands understand how to leverage the best data source for them to help them tell that story, to help them educate the retailer about the consumer that buys your product. So the fact that you've got a extremely reasonable price point is really fantastic because it's these stories that I'm trying to help brands understand and develop and you leverage. Again, having a canned top line report that tells you that your velocity is less than the big brand on the shelf does nothing. The reality is this: a big brand with deep pockets can buy velocity.
They
That
can buy
doesn't
mass.
mean,
They can buy mass. I'm not sure
well,
they can
yeah,
buy
well,
pocket. They can buy
velocity meaning
mass.
sales velocity, but yes,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
So they buy the velocity. So in other words, on a ranking report, if I'm a big brand, I've got deep pockets, I can say, look, I'm number one because I can spend more money than anyone else. But the reality is those brands pull dollars, valuable dollars out of the category. And the consumers that look at those products will go to the retailer that has the best price point, not necessarily the retailer that offers the best selection, etc. So this is where I want to work together maybe. And I mean, I'd love to do a case study to
Yeah.
help a brand understand how to help a retailer with those three things that they want. And the whole idea behind this is that instead of promoting your product because everyone says you need to promote your product, Now I want to focus on how do I help a brand choose the right promotions, the right customers, target the right retailers, all that stuff, and bring it together so that it's a win-win for you, for me, for the brand, for the retailer, for the consumer, everyone else. And that's why I was thrilled about having this conversation. So with that said, what are your thoughts? And then what anecdotal or whatever would you want to throw in there about being able to isolate the performance or be able to help a brand skate to where the puck's going within a specific market?
Yeah, the best way that we can be helpful is to understand those issues, those topics, those dietary issues that will be most relevant to the type of consumer that their product is going to meet, and to understand where the momentum, so to help them in product development, to help them in messaging, and to help them in distribution, show the momentum scores to build confidence along the way, to provide that data. We can also help with targeting. This is not the ideal tool for targeting. Targeting would be an analysis of with which groups does it have momentum with? Is it young women? Is it older males? Is it people? Is it Asian? Is it African American? But we can do that. We call that decoding, to get into which groups does it have the most momentum, which geographies. You're talking about Denver. Is it something in Denver? Is it Portland? Is it South? Miami? To understand where the biggest opportunity lies. But we can do this data analysis. You could give me 5 topics, issues, brands, ask me for an M factor, and we could get on the phone an hour from now, and I could tell you.
That's really cool. By the way, I've got a solution for that. That's kind of off the topic of this conversation, a solution to be able to answer the question that we're trying to get to. But my point is that this is a valuable resource, and this is something I'd love to see brands do. And, so why this matters. Many, many years ago, I did a project on a cheap for a brand that was just getting started. Now they're very popular in the snack category. And I had done a project for a different brand a couple weeks earlier, and they spent $17,500 on the data. This small brand, I know, expensive. And this particular small brand, I was able to buy a snapshot for about $2,500.
Right.
And yet I was able to help this brand go from 400 stores into 1,600 stores, go from under $1 million, actually under, I think they were about a couple $100,000, to $3 million within 3 years, and now they're absolutely huge. The point being is that it's how you use this data. It's how you tell the story.
Yeah.
And what frustrates me to no end in this industry is that there are a lot of well-meaning people that say, look, I printed this off on my own. Here's what the report tells me.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell the story. It doesn't tell me how the customer buys. It doesn't tell me why this product or this trend or whatever matters to that customer. Yeah. This is why this is so relevant. I would love to find a way to work together and to help bring these insights to the industry as a whole. And your price point is phenomenal, because I did a project for a company a couple months ago that one of the more recent projects, the big projects I did, where this company spent about $10,000-$12,000 to buy data that I had to go through and clean up and stuff like that, and it still had a lot of issues in it. And then that takes a lot of time. But to be able to get to the heart of the matter, and here's where I'm going with this, and I'd love to have your thoughts. If I can get you part way in the discussion, you, a brand, part way in the discussion, and help you identify which data sources you need to be able to support or analyze or help tell your story, and then teach you how to bake that into your selling story so that it resonates with retailers, so I can help you become a value-added resource to your retail partners. In other words, a category leader in my mind, and is any brand willing to step up and partner with their retailer, help their retailer drive sustainable sales by leveraging the strength of your consumer. So back to cauliflower. So if I can help cauliflower leverage that relationship with a retailer, my success has been retailers giving me their data instead of having to buy it. and then being able to overlay your insights, your, something like you would provide to be able to help that retailer, to give that retailer insights that they can't get anywhere else. And I think at the end of the day, that's the win-win. So I definitely want to find ways to partner together, to work together, to figure out how to leverage this more, because my biggest frustration in this industry, again, is that brands are somewhat blind. The databases that you buy are not going to help you answer those key questions
Exactly. We're
unless,
aligned.
yeah, exactly. And the challenge is, what data do you want to buy? If you want to know how you're doing at Whole Foods, well, don't buy this data. If you want to know how you're doing at a natural retailer, well, do they share their data? And then how is it comprised? And where does it come from? And what stores are in that database? And I mean, there's so many things, I guess, what I'm getting at that brands need to think about. But what you're talking about, that's right in front of you. And
Yeah,
it's not,
I'm talking about cultural relevancy. I'm not talking about the shopper data or the shopper insights or the data that is power. I'm talking about the data that's available that's going to answer so many of the questions that you're dealing with. I have a funny insight. As I'm hearing you speak, I was thinking if the people who go on Shark Tank that are in like the food products and so you could improve their success rate so much if you just help them tell their story better. Like
oh, yeah.
they you know what I'm saying? Like those, they always miss the key point, and the sharks always ask them the same questions, and they're the questions that you answer.
Exactly. This is why I'm thrilled that we're having this conversation. And so, yes, I guarantee we could help these brands out. I could help these brands, one, do more with the money that they've got so they wouldn't have to get so much of an investment. I've got a belief that a brand should not be a perpetual CEO. I mean,
Right,
that a CEO should not be a perpetual fundraiser. And
right,
if I can help a brand get more traction for R&D and to support the causes that matter and build sales and all that other
right.
stuff, then that's the win at the end of the day. But to answer your point, yes, absolutely yes. And so when you're talking about shopper user insights, etc., those aren't that good either.
No,
I can think of a lot of products that failed because the focus group told the brand what they thought they wanted the brand to hear
right.
rather than telling the brand what they really needed to hear, or they missed a lot of nuances, etc. This is where this comes in. This would be perfect for it. But to go one step further, being able to tell the sharks or whomever, here's the customer, here's what the customer's worth, here's the story around the customer journey. Here's how I fit into that, and here's how I can help the retailer remain relevant. Here's how I can return a higher this is how I can return a higher ROI to your investment dollar. So yeah, I'd love to have that conversation with someone.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time. My biggest regret, and you've really helped me. I was feeling it before this conversation. When Gail came to me and said she wanted to do the cauliflower and it didn't exist and it wasn't in any database and nobody knew about it, my biggest regret is I took a fee for it instead of just saying, hey, because the research was so strong. It was such a clear winner by a long shot. And to the point that I thought the research was too good. Here I was doing research for a dear friend, and it came out. I wish I would have just taken an interest in the company
Yes.
because that's how powerful. And I see that all the time. I know I can see the winners and losers based on our data from looking at who's the target audience, what's the position, what's the unmet need, what's the momentum score, and that's like I won't make that mistake again. But I did make the mistake.
So that's funny if she listens to this, you're going to have to say, hey, please, 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 can I?
She knows. I told her from the beginning this is going to be a huge winner.
Yeah.
Um, we made a few changes to some packaging and how she talked about it. But I mean, it was all Gail's genius and brilliance and persistence. But it was clear that this was going to be a huge success, and yet no one had really done it. It was all done maybe in kitchens as hacks
Right.
for kids rather than a product.
Well, and that's exactly why this is so relevant. And I've shared a lot of stories on the podcast about how I've, helped identify trends and opportunities for example, Annie's to go sit right next to Kraft mac and cheese or a lot of the other brands that are out there. The point being is that these are the things these brands need to see. These are the things these brands need to help with. They
Yeah.
don't need a canned top line report that, like I said, tells the same old, same old, same old. Now, in full
Yeah.
disclosure, I built my reputation in this industry by producing those. And so if you went to a retailer years ago and you got a canned report for them, I might have designed it. But I did that because it made it easier for the retailer to be able to quickly look at the data. So, I'm guilty. But I've gone way beyond that. And so this is what matters. And so thank you again for reaching out to me, because if we can help these brands understand what those trends are, help them capitalize on those trends, help
Yeah.
them innovate around those trends, this is going to be a game changer. It's, like I think I was kind of hinting at a little before, I knew gluten free was going to be a big, big, big deal long before it ever really showed
Right.
up,
Right.
because I was paying attention to the ripples, the tea leaves, or whatever you want to call it. So,
The momentum. Yep.
exactly. So, thank you for sharing that. So, tell us a little bit about how we get a hold of you, and how do we contact you. Tell, how do we reach out to you, and is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
No, this has been, I mean, I wrote a book called Maximum Momentum, which is available on Amazon, which I would love everybody to take a look at and see if it's
Sure.
something that's interesting to them. Our company is called Decode M, DECODE_M, and they can reach us at decode-m.com. And I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to work with you on these brands. Data is no longer just for the rich and powerful.
Yes.
Data should be accessible to everybody, and let's put our effort into R&D and innovation, and not be subject to just, data is only available to those who can afford it.
This is going to scare you. I'll throw this in real quick. I did a project for a big CPG company years ago, and they needed to buy the data for the entire salty snack category.
Yeah.
And they spent $135,000 just on that category. That's a
Well,
lot of money. And yet, if I had access to what you're talking about, I could have, I mean, granted, there was a lot more to the project, but, to be able to level the playing field, that's what this is about. And to be able to provide those insights that are better than, so, take that and then you add it to the syndicated data. There's a lot more we could do with this. But anyhow, so thank you so much for coming on. I'll be certain to put a link to Decode M on the
yeah.
website, in the show notes, and the book. And thanks for your time.
Yeah, I really appreciate, this time has been invaluable. This was very cool. I really appreciated it.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out. I want to thank Mike for coming on today. What a cool tool. And the best part about it is that you can leverage it to get insights that other brands don't have access to. And this is going to help you differentiate your brand from other brands on the shelf. This could also potentially help you with new innovation. What kind of product should you be thinking about that customers want to buy? You can learn more about it along with Mike's book on the podcast webpage and in the show notes. In addition to that, don't forget to check out the new Trade Promotion ROI Calculator while you're at the website. And you can get there by going to brandsecretsandstrategies.com/session 195. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.